All right, we're looking at the greatest common factor today, or simply the GCF. It's the greatest number or the greatest factor that's common with the other numbers. Let's look at this right here. Find the greatest common factor. We've got 8, 12, and 16. All right, if it's a common factor, then the lowest number, 8, it can't be any bigger than 8. So we'll try 8 and see if 8 goes into the other two. Well, 8 does not go into 12, so it has to be something lower than 8. So we got to figure something that goes into 8. Well, 4 does. 4 is the next biggest number. Does 4 go into 12? It certainly does. Does 4 go into 16? Yes, it does. So 4 is my GCF. It's the greatest number that goes into all three of them. All right, let's look at this next one. What's the greatest common factor of 10, 20, and 30? Well, as we said before, it can't be any bigger than 10. So let's try and see if 10 goes into them. Well, 10 goes into 20, 10 goes into 30. So there you go. My GCF for that is 10. So that's how you find the GCF of numbers. Now here's an expression. 10x plus 15. We first look at the numbers, the 10 and the 15, and see the GCF. Well, 10's the smallest one, so it can't be any bigger than 10. So let's try and see if 10 goes into 15. Well, it doesn't. All right, so let's take something smaller than 10 that goes into 10, like 5. 5 goes into 10. So we'll try and see if 5 goes into 15, and it does. So 5 is part of my GCF. Now this time we have an expression here. So I need to factor the 5 out. And then we need to look at our variables. Our variables, well, we got an x here, but there's no x's here. So 5 is all we can pull out. This is my GCF right here, 5. Now what I have to do is I have to divide it out. So 10 divided by 5 would be 2. I've got this x here, so the x is going to come on down into this term. Plus, now I've got 15 divided by 5, which is 3. And there's no variable here, so there you go. This is my greatest common factor factored out. And that's what I ended up with. Okay, here's another example. 6x squared minus 4x. Well, if I look at the 6 and the 4, 4 is the smallest, so I see if 4 goes into both of them. Well, 4 does not go into 6, so I got to pick something smaller than 4 that goes into 4. Well, 2 does. 2 goes into 4, and 2 goes into 6, so 2 is part of my GCF. Now I look at the variables. The variables, I got x squared here and I have x there. Well, it can't be any bigger than the smaller one. And so it looks like I can just pull out an x for both of those. So this is my GCF right here. Now I have to factor it out and see what's left. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. All right, then I do my variables. X squared, I divide one out. That's going to leave me an x. Then I have this minus. And then 4 divided by 2 is 2. I have this x, and I'm dividing it out, so there's no x left. And so there you go. There's my answer right there. Okay. Here's another one. 36 and 24. Well, 24 is the smallest, so I see if 24 goes into 36. Well, it doesn't. So I pick something less than 24 that goes into 24, like 12. 12 goes into 36. So there you go. There's my GCF number right there, 12. Then I look at my variables. Well, this has no variables, so I cannot pull a variable out. So it just looks like 12 is all I can pull out here. Now I divide it out. So I do 36 divided by 12, that's 3. And I have the x. I'm not dividing anything out, so the x stays. Plus, 24 divided by 12 is 2. I don't have a variable here, so I can't pull anything out. So there you go. There's my answer. All right. All right, what do you have here? 3x to the 3rd power minus 12x to the 5th power. Okay. So first thing I look at here, my 3 and my 12. So I try the smallest 3, and I see if 3 goes into 12. Well, it does. So 3 is part of my GCF. Now look at my variables. I got 3x to the 3 here, x to the 5. So my smallest one would be the greatest common factor. It can't be any bigger than the smallest one. So I have 3x3. That's my GCF right there. Now I want to factor it out. So if I go with this term, 3 divided by 3 would be 1. I'm not going to write it yet because I may not have to. x3 divided by x3 would be no x's, so yeah, I have just a 1 here. All right, 3 divided by 3 is 1. X to the 3, and I'm dividing out x3, which means I don't have any left, so it's just a 1. Minus. Now do this right here. 12 divided by 3, that's 4. I have x to the 5. I'm dividing out 3, which is going to leave me 2. So there's my GCF factored out. All right, we'll do some more. Here's one. All right, look at my numbers first, 20 and 15. All right, my GCF, there's 5. 5 is the biggest that goes into both of them. X4, X5, X4 is the smallest. That's the most I can bring out. And so there's my GCF. Okay, now 20 divided by 5 is 4. I've got X4. I'm dividing out X4, which means I have no X's left over. Minus. 15 divided by 5 is 3. I've got an X5. I'm dividing out 4, which means I'm going to have an X left over, and there's my GCF factored out. All right, we'll do some more. 8 and 12, the GCF of that is 4. Now, see how both of these are negative? That means we could pull out a negative 4 and get rid of the negatives in the expression. There's an x here, which is x to the 1, and there's an x2, so I can pull out an x. And there's my GCF. Now I factor it out. So negative 8 divided by negative 4 is a positive 2. I've got an x, and I'm factoring it out, so there's no x left over. All right, now this is not going to be minus here because I'm factoring the minus out. So I do negative 12 divided by negative 4, which is a positive 3. I've got an x squared. I'm dividing an x out, so it's going to knock it down to just 1x. And there you go. There's my GCF factored out. Okay, here's one here. Negative 12x squared plus 8x. Now, these are not both negative here, so I don't want to factor out a negative like I did on this previous one. See, these are both they're not both negative, so I don't need to factor out a negative. 12 and 8, my GCF for that is 4. And then they both have an x squared. So here you go, 4x squared. There's my GCF. So I'm going to factor it out. So negative 12 divided by 4 is negative 3. I've got an x squared. I'm dividing out the x squared, which means I have no x's left over. Then I have a plus. 8 divided by 4 is 2. I've got x to the 4th. I'm dividing out 2 of them. So it's going to leave me 2 left over. So x squared left over. Okay. What about this one? All right, now these both have a negative, so I can factor out a negative, but there's no number here, so I can't pull out any numbers. This has x3, that's got x4, so there's my GCF right there, negative x3. All right, so I factor it out. So I've got a negative, I'm factoring out the negative, so it's going to make this positive. And I've got x3, I'm dividing out x3, which means I'm not going to have any x's left over, so it's just a 1. Now, negative 5 divided by negative 1 would just be a positive 5. Then I have x4. I'm dividing out x3, which means I'm going to have an x left over. All right, so let me explain this again. This was like a negative 1 here, divided by negative 1, which is a positive 1. And then the x3s would just divide out. And negative 5 divided by negative 1 would be a positive 5. And x4 divided by x3 out would be an x. And so there's my answer there. Okay. Just a couple more examples here, and then we'll close up. Now they both have negatives, so I'm going to pull a negative out. And 32 and 42, I'm thinking just 2 goes into those. 2's the greatest common factor there. But they both have x3, so there you go. That's my greatest common factor there. So now I divide it out. Negative 32 divided by negative 2 is a 16. x4 divided out x3 would be an x. Negative 42 divided by negative 2 would be a positive 21. And I've got x3. I'm dividing out x3, which means I'm not going to have any x's left over. So there it is right there. Okay, now just got a few more. And these have more variables involved. Okay, so if I look at my numbers first here, negative 12 and negative 12, I can factor out a negative 12. Now look at my x variable. I've got x5 here. I've got x1, so I can pull out an x. I can't pull out any more than what the smallest one is. x4 or y4 and y3, I could pull out a y3. And on my z's, I could pull out a z3. So there's my greatest common factor there. Now I want to divide it out. So negative 12 divided by negative 12 is a 1. X divide out x would have no x now. Y4 divide out 3 would be a y. Z3 divide out of Z3, I would have no Z. So there you go. All I have is a 1y, or just a y. I really don't have to have the 1. Then I go to the next term. Negative 12 divided by negative 12 is a positive 1. Then look at my variables. X5 divided by x would be a x4. Y3 divided by y3 would have no y left over. Z6 divided out Z3 would be a Z3. And that's it. And then I don't really have to have that one. And so there's my greatest common factor right there, factored out. Okay, we'll do another one like that. All right, I've got negative 16, negative 12. So my greatest common factor of those numbers is 4. And I could do a negative 4 since they're both negative. Now if I look at my x's, x2 and x5, x2 is the smallest. Y4, Y3, Y3 is the smallest. And then Z2 is the smallest. So there's my greatest common factor right there. Now factor it out. All right, so negative 16 divided by negative 4 is a positive 4. X squared, I'm dividing out x squared, so I have no x's. Y4, I'm dividing out y3, which means I'm going to have a y left over. And then Z3 divided by Z2 is going to leave me a z left over. Now the next term, negative 12 divided by negative 4 is a positive 3. I have a y, or x5, I'm dividing out 2 of them, so it's going to leave an x3. Y3 divided by y3 cancels out. And then Z2 and Z2, that cancels out. And so there you go. That's my greatest common factor factored out. All right, one more here and then we'll be finished. 15 and 18 are my numbers. My greatest common factor for that is a 3. Look at my x's. I've got an x3 here. That's the smallest. I can't pull out any more than that. Y6 and Y2. Y2 is the smallest. And then Z, I got a Z here. That's my greatest common factor right there. Okay, well, let's factor it out. So 15 divided by 3 is 5. X5 divided out x3 would be x2. Y6 divided by y2 would be y4 left over. And then Z3, take a Z, would be Z squared. Okay, plus 18 divided by 6 would be a plus, or 18 divided by 3 would be a plus 6. X3 divided by x3 would be no x's. Y2 divided by y2 would be no y. Z divided by z would be no z. So there you go, that's just a 6. And that's my greatest common factor factored out. All right, so that's how you do the greatest common factor, the GCF. Let me know if you have any questions, and you have a good rest of the day.